some of you may have noticed me hand a question card to Chuck, and that was someone who asked me to pass a note to him that's saying they loved your articles on the San Francisco homeless problem, and that's one of our topics. Really was a good job. And that's probably the first time someone actually gave you a positive.
Oh, yeah. None of you are commenters on SF Chronicle, yes. I can tell. So.
But tell us a bit about this, because this is a very serious issue, and part of what you were talking about was the capacity that the city has actually put forward or had built up to handle this or not.
It's and the number is $241 million we spend annually, which is half of the operating budget of the city of Oakland. And how is it possible that we still see people on the sidewalk in rainstorms? It's a terrible, terrible situation. So, well, one of the things that I suggested, and in my role as philosopher king, I've been appointed by the mayor. I think the idea of saying we have a homeless problem is difficult to solve. We've got several different groups of people. It's much more diverse than that. And I think we begin with the people who are desperately mentally disturbed on the streets. And those people need to get off the street. We've all seen them with a thin blanket on a sidewalk. And instead, what we've done, and it's very well-intentioned, is what's called a wellness model, which is that you try to approach the person on the street and you try to convince them that they would be better served if they came in and took mood-stabilizing drugs, which make them fat, unhappy, and depressed, instead of the meth that they've been using, which makes them happy and chipper for an hour and a half, and then they're good. I mean, it's seriously that much of a question. These people are saying, I'm depressed, I'm down, I know what would make me feel better. It would be methamphetamine. So I'd start with those people, and I would make an outreach. And what we've really done instead is cut the number of psychiatric acute care beds in San Francisco in general. And it's the oddest story I've ever covered, because people from the acute care emergency ward get in contact with me, doctors and nurses, and say we're being forced to send these people back out on the streets, even though they're seriously mentally disturbed. And we know if we could keep them for a week, we could at least get them stabilized. And instead, we're not even keeping them 24 hours. And then you talk to the people at the hospital, the administrators and the spokespeople, and they're like, that's ridiculous. We haven't cut the beds at all. That's not true. It's all, things are going very well. We're proud of our work. So I think there's a disconnect. I would also say families and children would be second. I'd start with the severely mentally ill. I'd go to families and children. And third, I'd go to the veterans, because not only do they serve the country, but they also have access to a lot of federal money from different sources.
Didn't the mayor at one point say he was going to look into conservatorships? Mm-hmm. Whatever happened?
Well, that's a tough one, as you would know. Conservatorships are very difficult to get in San Francisco. They sound draconian.
Explain briefly what
a conservatorship would be, and I have a woman who writes me on a regular basis, and her son is now 28. He's bipolar. He's severely mentally ill. He goes up, he goes down. She described a situation to me where he was staying with them at the house, and he came downstairs and said, I have something I need to talk to you about. And her husband immediately ran for the phone to try to call 911, because he knew that when he said that, it was the beginning of a break. And he couldn't get there in time, and the son grabbed him and tossed him. He went over a table into the fireplace. The mother was trying to restrain him. I mean, it's a terrible, and she's begging to please put him in a conservatorship, give him an opportunity to have a more normal life, and for us to have a more normal life. And it just we cannot get it through.
Conservatorship is kind of a power of attorney. So a person sort of, there's somebody else who is able to make medical decisions and decisions about whether they should be in treatment. And at one point, the city attorney said that he was going to look into, like, the city basically getting its own conservatorship over some of these folks who run up really high bills at SF General. Every once in a while you read an article, maybe it's one of yours, that talks about how there's sort of a dozen or 24 folks who are responsible for a large percentage of the spending we have on emergency services for these guys. So the idea was you take this, this smaller group, and you somehow get them under the conservatorship, and that way you can force them into treatment legally without running into any problems. But that hasn't happened.
It hasn't happened, and thanks for explaining it, because that's what I was supposed to do and I didn't do. But that's but
your story was way better.
They're actually saying in the city, if they could get 100, they have 100 people identified, and if they could get them off the street and into care and get them stabilized, you'd see a big difference on the street. And it just seems impossible in a city with this kind of money and concern and services that we can't get those 100 people some kind of help. And I would just start with that. And from there on, I think, there's obviously some people who are having drug addiction problems, and it may be politically incorrect, but I can tell you, I've talked to people who say I would rather live on the street. I talked to a 21-year-old kid 3 weeks ago who had gone to college for a while. I thought he was some kind of a social worker. And he said, no, I live in a tent right here on Division Street. And he said, yeah, I know I have personal skills. I'll bet I could get a job, but I just really like getting high. And he's spending time in that tent on Division Street, and I'd put those guys at the bottom of my list. I'd put the severely mentally ill. I'd put the people with children, women in particular, single women with children, single women by themselves. I'd do veterans. And then those 30-something age guys, we'll get to you and we'll get these other guys taken care of. And I think it'd make a big difference on the street.